MedMun 2021.
Welcome to MedMun 2021. Je suis Axel Martin.
And I'm Lilinaz Hakimi.
Nous sommes très heureux de vous accueillir pour cette édition un peu spéciale du MedMun 2021.
Mais alors, Axel, where are all the delegates?
Right there, lady.
Oh, MedMun 2021 is fully online.
Yes, mais t'inquiète, cette édition sera encore mieux que si elle s'était tenue en présentiel sur notre campus de Menton. Nous vous avons préparé 5 comités en 5 langues.
Specialized speakers here to give you a glimpse at the inner workings of international relations.
Des délégués prodigieux, prêts à débattre sur des sujets passionnants.
And fun online events to help you connect with students from all around the world.
Mais avant de commencer cette cérémonie d'ouverture, nous aimerions vous présenter notre Secretary General.
As a second-year student at Sciences Po Paris, campus du Menton, she's hardworking, dedicated, and passionate to spreading the MedMun spirit not only within the team, but to you all. For her third and final year, she'll be heading to Cairo to study at the Département de l'enseignement de l'arabe contemporain.
Elle a dédié toute son énergie pour cette édition et a travaillé 24 heures sur 24 pour qu'elle se réalise du mieux possible.
Now let's hear from our hard-working captain, our brilliant leader, our Secretary General.
Mathilde Solage.
Honorable speakers, chairs, delegates, and faculty advisors, it is my pleasure to warmly welcome you to the 9th edition of the Mediterranean Model United Nations. I would have been delighted to say these words in the amphitheater of our beautiful campus on our breathtaking Côte d'Azur, and see each and every one of you fill the seats, one by one, patiently waiting for your committee sessions to start. However, this year was one of adaptation, which is why we decided to bring the sun and the beach to you, wherever you may be, through your screen. My friends and family like to joke that I chose the worst year to run such an association, but I became Secretary General out of passion. Passion for creating an environment of growth, both for my team and for you, MedMun participants. I tried my best to cultivate team effort, innovation, and prise d'initiative. You see, team effort was crucial for the MedMun members to build up on their diverse qualities and create a top-notch conference for you, as it is for the countries you are representing in solving the most pressing issues of the Middle East and the Mediterranean. Innovation, or outside-the-box thinking, was a significant part of the board's work in coming up with new projects and new strategies. Innovation will have to be cultivated by each of you, especially when faced with the incredibly challenging topics of your committees. And finally, initiative taking took form in the concrete realization of the 10 2021 MedMun projects. Similarly, we expect each and every one of you to have the courage, which seems to be lacking in so many of our world leaders, to make peacemaking plans a reality. From expanding our workshops in the underprivileged School of Menton, multiplying our partnerships, creating brand new MUNs with other Sciences Po campuses, UPenn and Georgetown, to launching a brand new MUN consulting branch, one main goal remained in our minds, our annual MedMun conference. Ces préparations furent, dans un premier temps, largement freinées par la pandémie qui bouleverse nos vies depuis maintenant bien plus d'une année. Je me demandais si mon entourage n'avait pas peut-être raison à me dire que j'avais choisi la pire année pour devenir secrétaire général. En effet, assurer la préparation minutieuse de plusieurs possibilités pour notre conférence, en ligne, en présentiel, en format hybride, et garantir la présence de MedMun à travers l'année fut une épreuve considérable. Et bien que nous garderons tous à travers les prochaines décennies les effets bouleversants de ces années masquées, nous sommes loin d'avoir été les plus impactés par le Covid-19. Le monde a connu des pertes dramatiques en vie humaine. À ce jour, 2,61 millions de personnes ont perdu la vie de cette maladie. Et les conséquences sociales, économiques, physiques et psychologiques sont aussi dévastatrices. Des dizaines de milliers de personnes risquent de tomber dans l'extrême pauvreté. Des millions d'emplois ont été perdus ou sont encore menacés. Chacun d'entre nous a vécu des fermetures de frontières, des mesures de confinement, de couvre-feu et des restrictions commerciales, l'école et l'université en ligne. De manière très visible dans notre société française, le Covid a brisé des familles et des nations entières autour de frustration, d'incompréhension et de remise en question. Enfin, et ce qui est sans doute le plus tragique, les problématiques urgentes de notre monde ont souvent été mises en pause pour gérer la pandémie. 325 million. As of 2015 statistics, that is the number of Syrian, Iraqi, Libyan, and Yemeni refugees that resulted from conflicts in these countries. 85,000. That is the number of children who died, to this day, from the Yemen famine. 115 million. That is the number of people living in poverty in 14 Arab countries in 2020, compared to 66 million in 2010. I am giving you these statistics not to perpetuate widespread stereotypes on the MENA region, but to allow you to better understand what is at stake when MedMen tackles the theme multilateral security in conflict and post-conflict zones. Since the outbreak of the democratic Arab uprisings of 2010 and 2011, the region has largely worsened in the political, social, and economic realms. The catastrophic Syrian civil war that has taken an unspeakable human toll, the ongoing Yemen civil war, the devastating afterwork of the US intervention in Iraq, the financial and political Lebanese crisis, the second Libyan civil war, the everlasting plight of the Palestinians, protests in Algeria, Sudan, Iraq, and Lebanon. The picture is painfully clear. Security, in all of its forms, has rarely been so fragile for populations spanning from Rabat to Tehran and from Ankara to Sana'a. These conflicts have been, and remain to be, largely amplified by the spread of terror, intrastate rivalry, power competition, and proxy war. Along with the Arab-Israeli, Saudi-Iranian, and Arab-Turkish discords, a new geopolitical cleavage, that of Saudi Arabia, Egypt, and UAE, rivalry against Turkey and Qatar in the East Mediterranean, has added another level of complexity to the region's challenges. Going on, a declining transatlantic cohesion and the pandemic have resulted in the zone making top news headlines all throughout the last year. This is where you come in, dear representatives. Delegates of the Human Rights Committee determine how to strive for a global humanitarian effort in Yemen. Arab League countries assess the necessary measures to rebuild Syria after the terrorist havoc. Each and every one of you, imagine ways of encouraging dialogue and de-escalation, restore trust amongst yourselves, gauge the external and internal threats, and most of all, remember that your work will have to constitute a long-term generational struggle for peace. Il y a exactement 2 ans, jour pour jour, je prononçais un discours en tant que secrétaire général du modèle francophone des Nations Unies de La Haye. Je me trouvais également à quelques mètres de la mer du Nord. J'avais 17 ans, et en regardant des extraits de ce discours, je ne peux m'empêcher de penser qu'après 2 ans à Sciences Po, étudiant l'histoire, la politique, la philosophie et le droit, je comprends en fait bien moins le monde que ce dont j'étais persuadée il y a 2 ans. Cependant, un aspect reste inchangé. And that is the intimate belief that each and every one of us can, collectively, truly better our societies in an inclusive, intelligent, and loving way. What a better way to illustrate this than with the image of Pope Francis releasing a dove amidst the ruins of Iraq 2 weeks ago. He met with Grand Ayatollah Ali al-Sistani, the spiritual leader of the Iraqi Shias. This groundbreaking and historic meeting is proof that amongst hate, collapse, war, and divide, it is possible to raise your voice in protecting the weakest and most persecuted.
Merci beaucoup Mathilde pour ton beau discours.
Chut, Axel, we're in a classroom.
Je suis désolé mais moi j'ai fait mon job.
Ah oui, nous devons introduire notre prochaine speaker, Yasmina Touaibia.
Notre directrice de campus depuis 2018 est quelqu'un de très importante pour nous.
Her continued work with Sciences Po and Menton strengthens the students' educational experience.
Son attachement particulier pour la Méditerranée et le Moyen-Orient l'a porté jusqu'à la présidence de notre campus.
Now, let's hear from Madame la directrice.
Madame Yasmina Touaibia.
Chères lycéennes, chers lycéens, chères étudiantes, chers étudiants, bienvenue à cette 5e édition du MedMun, simulation des Nations Unies pour le campus Moyen-Orient-Méditerranée de Sciences Po à Menton. Une 5e édition qui est consacrée à la sécurité multilatérale dans les zones de conflit et de post-conflit, une thématique qui devait se dérouler l'an dernier et qui n'a pas pu finalement se tenir, un événement qui n'a pas pu se tenir à cause de la pandémie. À ce titre, je vous remercie toutes et tous, malgré le contexte, d'avoir fait confiance à l'équipe du MedMun et de vous être inscrits, même à distance, à cet événement. Cette 5e édition réunit d'éminents spécialistes et experts, dont Gilles Kepel, professeur de notre campus, auteur de l'ouvrage « Le prophète et la pandémie », Hervé Latsous, ancien secrétaire général adjoint des Nations Unies, pour les opérations de maintien de la paix, Vous serez ainsi 300 délégués répartis en 19 comités. Vous endosserez le costume de représentant d'État pour des débats qui promettent d'être riches, d'être vifs, qui se déclineront en 5 langues, l'anglais, l'arabe, le français, l'italien, le turc, autant de langues qui font la richesse de notre communauté étudiante, qui font la richesse de notre région méditerranéenne et qui font la richesse de notre projet pédagogique. Pour cette 5e édition, peut-être un regret, celui de ne pas vous voir tous sur notre campus, celui de ne pas vous voir toutes et tous sur notre campus, et un grand espoir, celui d'un prochain déroulement plutôt en présentiel du MedMun pour la 6e édition. Bon vent à cette 5e édition pour l'heure, bon débat et au plaisir de vous retrouver très vite sur notre campus.
Et créer des espèces de systèmes viraux.
Professeur à Sciences Po et à l'École normale supérieure, après terreur dans l'Hexagone.
A French academic, specialist on the contemporary Middle East, and Sciences Po professor, Gilles Kepel is one of the founding fathers of Sciences Po Paris, campus du Menton.
Aussi à l'aise en italien qu'en dialecte égyptien, ses livres sont de vrais best-sellers dans le monde diplomatique.
Devoted to our intellectual growth, Gilles Kepel teaches us about the ins and outs of the complex region of the Middle East and Mediterranean.
Messieurs, dames, Gilles Kepel.
Chers délégués du MedMun 2021, dear MedMun 2021 delegates, c'est un grand plaisir pour moi de présenter les premiers mots inauguraux de cette conférence dans le campus de Menton, un campus qui va entamer cette année sa 16e année d'existence et qui est dédié à un collège universitaire spécialisé dans le Moyen-Orient et la Méditerranée. It's a great honor for me to say the opening words for this conference, this 2021 conference, on the premises of the Menton College of Sciences Po, which is dedicated to the Middle East and the Mediterranean, and which is now going to open its 16th year. Ce campus a été créé à l'époque pour favoriser la connaissance non seulement des jeunes filles et jeunes gens français et européens de la zone Moyen-Orient-Méditerranée, mais également pour intégrer en son sein un certain nombre d'étudiants originaires des rives sud et est de la Méditerranée, et ainsi créer un lieu d'échange et un lieu de dialogue avec de fortes exigences intellectuelles. This campus was originally created for 2 aims. On the one hand, the issue was to have a number of young French students, European students, and international students study the Middle East and the Mediterranean, and also to bring here, together with them, a number of young people and students from the southern and eastern shores of the Mediterranean, in order to exchange, to discuss, and to create a sort of a common ground for in order to envision the world of tomorrow. Au départ, le campus avait pour exigence une connaissance des langues de la région, bien sûr du français, de l'italien, de l'anglais, mais aussi et d'abord et avant tout de la langue arabe. Et j'espère que cela sera de nouveau un objectif réaffirmé dans les années qui viennent. This campus originally was focused not only on geopolitics, but also on languages and civilization, not only French, Italian, English, Spanish, and the like, but also, and first and foremost, Arabic. And I hope that will remain a strong objective in the years to come. Le Medmoon de cette année 2021 est consacré aux enjeux géopolitiques de la région dans le système global. Et effectivement, c'est un thème particulièrement actuel puisque l'année 2020, marquée notamment par la pandémie, et dans laquelle nous sommes toujours plongés malheureusement, s'est traduite par des bouleversements majeurs dans la région. The year 2020 was a year of major changes in the region, and therefore it seems to me a very good idea and a very good opportunity to discuss in this forum the main geopolitical upheavals and changes in the Middle East Mediterranean region and in the world at large. And as you know, 2020 was the year of the COVID-19 pandemic, and unfortunately we're still in the middle of it. Cette année 2020, et avec ses prolongements en 2021, a été marquée par l'apparition de nouvelles lignes de faille à l'intérieur de l'espace Moyen-Orient méditerranéen, opposant ce que j'ai pu appeler un axe fréro-chiite regroupant la Turquie, le Qatar, l'Iran, soutenant l'expansion de l'islam politique des frères musulmans, à une autre alliance connue comme Accord d'Abraham ou Entente d'Abraham, et qui, avec les États-Unis et Israël, et après les traités de paix signés par l'Égypte et la Jordanie avec l'État hébreu, a vu se joindre aujourd'hui les Émirats arabes unis, Bahreïn, le Soudan et finalement le Maroc. This year 2020 was a decisive watershed year that sort of underlined new fault lines and deepen new fault lines. One that I believe we could call sort of the brotherist Shia alliance that brings together Turkey, Qatar and Iran and the Islamic Republic of Iran with an aim to boost political Islam worldwide. Opposed to it, we now have another alliance, which is called the Abraham Agreements or Accords, which brings together with the United States and Israel, and after Egypt and Jordan had already signed peace agreements with the Jewish state, the United Arab Emirates, Bahrain, the Sudan and Morocco. Ces bouleversements sont considérables. Ayant étudié cette région depuis 40 ans, je n'avais jamais vu un changement d'une telle ampleur. Bien sûr, il faut essayer de savoir si pour 2021 et la suite, ils vont rester les mêmes, s'ils vont se transformer ou non, et c'est justement l'un des grands défis de votre Medmoon 2021. Those changes that happened in 2020 were huge, and with my 40-year experience in the region, I've never seen anything like that. Now the big issue and the big challenge for us as students of the area is to wonder whether those fault lines would go on unmoved in the following years, starting with 2021, or whether they will be changed in a significant way. And this is one of the major challenges ahead of us. L'année 2020 a été marquée par la fin de la présidence Donald Trump aux États-Unis, qui à la fois a souhaité se retirer de la région Moyen-Orient-Méditerranée en ramenant les boys à la maison, notamment pour des raisons électorales, mais également mettre en place une nouvelle structure dans laquelle les alliés des États-Unis pourrait servir de relais à leur politique. The year 2020 has witnessed a sort of American pullback from the area, among other things for electoral reasons, because Donald Trump thought he could be re-elected if he managed to show that he brought the boys back home. He did not succeed, as you know. But in the same time, he was keen to engineer a new role for allies of the U.S. in the region, and this is what lays at the backbone of the Abraham agreements. Maintenant, de nouveaux enjeux qui se présentent sont à la fois liés à la présidence Biden, d'une part, et également à ceux qui va se passer dans la relation entre la région et l'Europe. I believe that the new challenges ahead are now linked to what is going to come out of the Biden presidency, which has a very strong agenda in foreign affairs, and also what is going to happen in the relationship between the southern and eastern shores of the Mediterranean on the one hand and Europe on the other. En ce qui concerne la présidence Biden, le principal enjeu, c'est la tentative de réinsérer l'Iran dans le système international, à la fois en s'appuyant sur le JCPOA du 14 juillet 2015, en revenant sur les mesures d'isolement et de sanctions de Donald Trump, tout en utilisant les avantages que les États-Unis en ont retirés. As far as the Biden presidency is concerned in the Middle East, the first challenge now is the new politics vis-à-vis Iran, how to bring back Iran in the international community, based on a return to some of the principles of the July 14, 2015 GCPOA, taking a distance from Donald Trump's 2018 distancing himself from those agreements, and with the aim to sort of engineer a new policy vis-à-vis Iran, which is still definitely in the making. Pour ce qui est maintenant de la relation avec l'Europe, l'année 2020 et son automne en particulier ont été marqués par ce que j'ai appelé le djihadisme d'atmosphère, c'est-à-dire après l'échec de Al-Qaïda, l'échec de Daesh, des réseaux qui ont été détruits aussi bien par les bombardements que par la cybersécurité, on assiste à un nouveau type de djihadisme avec d'un côté des entrepreneurs de colère qui vont cibler des individus sans nécessairement les condamner à mort, et après des individus qui vont prendre sur eux-mêmes de les tuer, notamment parce qu'ils se sont formés dans toute une logique djihadiste sur le web ou à travers leurs contacts privés, mais sans appartenir à une organisation. Et ça, c'est le grand défi que nous rencontrons, et particulièrement en France, mais aussi en Autriche ou même en Suisse aujourd'hui. As far as the relation between Europe and the eastern and southern shores of the Mediterranean is concerned, one of the major challenges is what I try to call atmospheric jihadism. That is to say that after the sort of jihadi organizations that we had witnessed in the past, from the sort of Leninist-shaped Al-Qaeda or the network-based Daesh, we now have a jihadism without organization. On the one hand, we have the network of entrepreneurs of rage who identify on the social networks, on the web and on the like, people who are singled out as Islamophobes, enemies, and whatever. Though those people, those entrepreneurs of rage, whether they're anonymous or not anonymous, would not sentence them to death. But they target their victims, and then you have another group of people who have sort of educated themselves, if I may say so, in a sort of radical jihadism, whether on online or through their contacts and their networks, their human networks, and then who take on them after they have been influenced to go to action and to assassinate those people, as we saw in France with Zahir Mahmoud, with Abdullah Ansorov, and very close from Menton in Nice at the Basilica Notre Our Lady of the Assumption. Pour nous, bien sûr, c'est un enjeu considérable. Un enjeu considérable parce que ce nouveau djihadisme pose des questions, réactions, comment est-ce que les sociétés peuvent y répondre, et c'est dans ce sens qu'en France est débattue en ce moment à l'Assemblée puis au Sénat une loi qui a été appelée au départ contre le séparatisme islamiste, puis pour le renforcement des principes républicains, et qui vise non plus seulement les effets du terrorisme djihadiste, mais également ses causes, qui pose un certain nombre de questions de restriction des libertés publiques pour augmenter la sécurité de la société. This phenomenon was translated into a response, particularly in France, with a legal dimension, which aimed to address not only the effects of jihadism, as was the case in the past with the police actions and the like, but rather its causes, and particularly the dissemination of hatred in line. And this has led to the formulation of a new law, which is now being discussed in the French Parliament and the French Senate, that was called originally the Law Against Islamist Separatism, or then the law to reinforce Republican principles. And this aims to deal with the causes and not only with the after effects. It is a law which is, of course, a big issue because it restricts, to some extent, some public liberties for the sake of security. Mais d'une certaine manière, cette logique qui s'inscrit dans une digitalisation du monde, dans une virusisation générale du monde, d'une certaine manière, n'est pas si étrangère à ce que, d'un côté, on fait aux États-Unis, l'administration Biden souhaite faire pour rendre les pourvoyeurs d'accès, les GAFA, responsables des contenus haineux sur leur site, même s'ils disent que c'est anonyme, mais ils gagnent de l'argent avec, ou même sur les lois qui sont prises pour maintenir la sécurité pendant la diffusion de la pandémie qui nous oblige à porter des masques ou à être confinés. But those laws that boost issues of security and that may put into question some of our liberties for that sake are not quintessentially different, in my view, from what, for instance, the Biden administration is now considering in order to make the GAFAs accountable for the contents that are widespread on the number of websites, even though authors may be anonymous, but nevertheless the access purveyors make money out of it, so they have to have some responsibility. And by the same token, we are now faced in our highly viral planet with COVID-19 and other things to a number of measures that restricts, for instance, the right to come and go, and you have to wear a face mask, and you have to bear with lockdown. And so this is part and parcel, I believe, of a global change in the world system, which is not only linked to the Mediterranean, but which is also definitely in tune with what is happening in the planet at large. Avec tout cela, donc, je vous souhaite des débats fructueux. J'espère qu'il sera possible de garder, alors que tout le monde est très mobilisé pour ou contre ces différents aspects, une dimension aussi objective et universitaire que possible. Et je vous souhaite un très grand succès pour tout cela. And with that, I can only wish you a very fruitful 2021 MedMoon conference. And I hope that in spite of the fact that everybody is so adamant about his or her own positions on this issue, that you will be able to keep a sort of academic tone to all that and not rush to passions immediately. Donc, ألف مبروك أهلا وسهلا وإن شاء الله سنستفيد من مدمون 2021 بكل سرور.
Il fait beau aujourd'hui.
Presque autant que Simone Petroni, non?
Ah oui, our next speaker is one heavily experienced in the field of international relations, today working as the head of political sections in the Office of EU Representatives in the West Bank and Gaza Strip.
Simone Petroni a également travaillé au ministère des Affaires étrangères italiennes et de la coopération internationale pendant 9 ans.
Immersed in diplomacy in the MENA region, his on-the-ground work is of high value to this conference.
Mesdames et messieurs, Simone Petroni.
Dear friends, I'm very happy to attend this 9th edition of the Mediterranean Model United Nations, MedMoon, though unfortunately not being able to be with you in Menton. But I thank you really for involving me in this very important event, in which I would like to share with you some few reflections and thoughts on the general theme of the conference. Multilateral security and in conflict and post-conflict zone, although I will not focus, let's say, on my current work experience. So this will be probably concepts with which you are probably already very familiar. So I hope this contribution is useful. I think we can start by saying that in the last 30 years, both practitioners and scholars have paid extensive attention to conflict prevention and conflict management. The former being designed to resolve, manage, or contain disputes before they become violent, and the latter in turn meaning referring to the limitation, the mitigation, and the containment of conflict. These activities, as you know, are carried out through a whole series of techniques such as mediation, peacekeeping, confidence building measures, track 2, track 3, diplomacy, etc. We have to, and you probably already discussed this in your debates, both the United Nations and regional organizations such as the EU and others, NATO, SEC, but also state entities, non-governmental organizations, have engaged in recent years in let's say systematic lessons learned and best practices exercises, particularly addressing past failures or let's say missed opportunities. But we have to agree and accept that and recognize that despite all these developments, the outbreak of conflicts somehow remains still an enigma. So conflicts continue to emerge, and many of them turn violent. And so there is, in many cases, the international community is unable to prevent the outbreak of conflicts. And one of the main sources of frustration is the inability to credibly and accurately predict them and then respond to them once they threaten to turn violent. In general, the literature, and of course what I'm sharing with you is based on a series of readings I had in the last period, the literature recognizes that this is due both to the complex dynamics of conflicts and also to the reluctance of many actors of the international community and states to take steps that involve clear risks and cost. When it comes to the causes of conflicts, there are of course no simple explanations for causes of conflicts, but what we could, I think, already distinguish is between the structural underlying causes of conflict, and here we can name a few: state weakness, poverty, high population growth, resource scarcity, discrimination and disempowerment of minorities, but also political injustice, economic deprivation, etc. So we can consider those as example of structural causes, but there are also proximate causes that trigger, let's say, specific conflict escalation. And already today, conflict prevention tends to differentiate between the structural and short-term prevention. Now, when it comes to the historical experience of conflicts, particularly from the mid-90s onwards, the sobering experiences in places like Rwanda, also Somalia, Yugoslavia, gave rise to this realization that there existed a need to reassess the role of international entities in conflict prevention and management, and at the same time, the increasing diversity of players in international affairs led to the necessity to a certain multilateralization of conflict prevention efforts. And this multilateralization presupposes, let's say, a common vision on conflict resolution, in the sense that all the actors, parties involved should accept that they should subscribe to this common vision. I would say that today, in the light of the emergence of new threats compared to that historical period, emergence of new security threats emanating particularly from violent non-state actors, in general, conflict is changing, and the security environment is even more complex today. So, in the light of this, of the emergence of these new threats, even more, let's say, states and international organizations, they have to, in a way, review the tools they use to manage conflict, and in general also to collaborate, to find some forms of collaboration and cooperation, both in military and diplomatic coordination, including in global counterterrorism. What are the challenges to these processes? First of all, that this organization that we are discussing have a diversity of mandates, of some bureaucratic resistances, but also when it comes to states, there are of course national interests that can be conflicting, as views on conflict prevention also can be conflicting. This said, the historical experience shows that it's possible to engage in a useful division of labor. For example, just to name, long-term missions and socio-political work on questions such as democracy building, human and minority rights, and the promotion of civil society are more suitable in general for regional and international organizations or NGOs. While in turn, only very few organizations are capable to rapidly and effectively respond to a crisis which is ongoing. And by the way, this rapid response needs also a credible warning, especially in the light of potential large-scale killings. This is what we have seen from the experience in the case of Rwanda, for example, the importance of this early warning, which is essential for the political mobilization of the international community. Now, I will not go into comparing the different policy approaches, since there is a significant body of literature that attempted to compare the different approaches of organizations such as the EU, the UN, NATO, and OSCE. basis on the experiences of the field. But so even if we don't want to indulge in that now, what we can say is that what they have in common is, especially from the point of the theory, is that the notions such as comprehensiveness and integrations are widely present today in multilateral approaches to crisis management. And when we refer to a comprehensive approach, we refer to the strategic objective to coordinate and integrate among different civilian and military actors involved in the conflict, which consequently means involving action using a full range of tools that can be political, economic, civilian, and military to solve a single conflict or problem. This said, authors have identified a number of potential difficulties that may arise when integrating this level, tools, and phases of conflict. First of all, the coordination between various actors may prove difficult due to complex or conflicting processes and interests. And from here, the importance of a doctrine as the one of effective multilateralism that serves as a prerequisite for an integrated approach in what are often crowded theaters. Secondly, a process of integration may undermine local ownership, and we know that let's say the input of local actors is indispensable in these processes, but let's say that integration could weaken or overlook the key aspect of local ownership. At the same time, process of integrating responses to conflict have to happen in a conflict-sensitive way, in the sense that we have to be able to anticipate how interventions will impact and interact with dynamics on the ground. Now, what I would like maybe to add now, according to my views, is another challenge, is that there are, from the emergence of rising powers in international conflict management. I'm not referring to an homogeneous group of states, since most of these rising powers have different responses to international conflicts, but what they might have in common is a strong criticism of the current international order, and therefore this criticism is at the same time accompanied by a willingness to upgrade their international status, to become viable actors that may compete with traditional powers in global governance policy areas, and let's say in international conflict management, but also in other let's say also in other policy areas such as nuclear proliferation, climate change, fight international terrorism, and economic and financial governance. Now, due to time constraints, I cannot really indulge excessively in this, but what many authors have described is that these rising powers seem from one end to be strongly attached to what we can consider the Westphalian norms of sovereign equality and non-interference in internal affairs, and at the same time, in what I mentioned, the criticism of what they perceive as an unjust Western-dominated liberal order. And this impacts also the way they conceive their role in sustaining international peace and security. This said, if we have a close look at the current international conflict landscape, we can see that in the case of existing overriding interest, this rising power proved to be able to cooperate with with traditional powers in sustaining peace through conflict management, and probably also in the light of their inclination to achieve higher status and recognition in world politics. We can also say that this quest for status also turned them into transformative actors, seeking reform and revision of the international system. But here I think many authors emphasize that they seem to have weaker capacities compared to traditional powers, as in setting out, let's say, institutional design for conflict management, since they generally lack strong institutional and norm building capabilities compared to more traditional powers and actors. Now, just in order to reach a sort of conclusion, if possible, in such a complex, let's say, scenario and picture, what we can say is that probably in the current global governance structure, international conflict management requires a new and more effective institutional foundation, new concept, and also new distribution of roles among traditional and non-traditional actors. So from one point of view, I think that we, particularly as Europeans, we have to be sensitive to those positions that challenge what we can define the Western liberal tradition of interventionism in conflict affected areas. But in this we have to be able, in a way, to at the same time safeguard, let's say, our values and interests, and you know that particularly the EU is based on very clear and strong values that we should anyway safeguard. But at the same time, allow me to use the expression, we should also consolidate what could be considered a post-colonial security architecture, which is in line also with the broader strategy of multilateralizing the security architecture, particularly in what we call the global south, or what some literature call the global south. And let me add, maybe availing myself of the thought of an author, of an important author that, like Achille Mbembe, that I would advise everyone listening to this contribution to read, and somehow paraphrasing him, a contribution to a more stable global security architecture also lies in a renewed and joint effort by the West, and particularly by Europe and the non-Western world, to enact a more inclusive, sustainable and equitable vision of reason and humanity than what came about in the globalization processes of the past, at least so far. But I think I even went beyond my time limit, so I thank you for your attention, and I wish, of course, a fruitful continuation of your conference, and hopefully meet you in person in one of the next occasions in Menton. Thank you.
As we walk through our little corner of the world, Menton-Vieilleville, we are pleased to introduce our next speaker, Hervé Latsou.
Ancien secrétaire général adjoint aux opérations de maintien de la paix de l'ONU, il ferait un parfait délégué pour un UN, non?
Yes, I think he'd be a little overqualified for MedMun, but he is the perfect person to educate our delegates about the ins and outs of the United Nations. Ladies and gentlemen, let's hear from Hervé Latsou.
Okay, so ladies and gentlemen, distinguished guests, good morning or good day. It is a privilege to be invited to share a few thoughts with you on the opening of this important meeting. Needless to say, I regret very much that the present circumstances prevent me from traveling to you, but at least electronics compensate on some of the circumstances of this terrible crisis that we've been experiencing for a year now. Let me introduce myself. My name is Hervé Latsou. I am Ambassador of France, which is a lifelong dignity. And in the course of almost 50 years, I served in many parts of the world, but to a large extent in Asia, Asia Pacific, and in the multilateral system. my last post was not a French post, actually, but I was Under Secretary General of the United Nations in charge of peacekeeping operations at a time when those operations reached the maximum height of the volume. In 2015, I remember, we had 125,000 people serving in 16 countries in the world, and the budget I was responsible for was about $5 billion a year. I was thinking that I would like to share with you some of my views of the present very serious situation that the world has been experiencing over the last 10 or 15 years. And all this can be summed up under the concept of the crisis of multilateralism. Multilateralism, as you know, is something that has been built over many decades, if not centuries, to give a better means to the world to manage its difficulties, its problems, and to make it something that can better support better conditions for everyone on the planet. This has been done over a long time. I think the first phase, you would remember Henry Kissinger describing in the 1740s the signing of the Treaties of Westphalia, which established the first framework of some rule of law for the world organization, at least at the time for Europe, based on sovereign equality of states, on the importance of binding commitments of treaties. That was, I think, a very important first phase. Then, in the 1890s, came the very first start of international judiciary system with the establishment of the International Court of Arbitration, which later led to the creation of the International Court of Justice, later again to a number of criminal judiciary institutions. And the third phase, of course, the most important, was the establishment through the Charter of San Francisco of the United Nations and the UN system. All this made it that gradually humanity had a framework to manage its problems, its issues, be they local or regional or global, within at least a minimum of rule of law and more security for everyone concerned. But unfortunately, over the last 15 or 20 years, that system, which was never perfect, I would accept, but has been deeply eroded by a number of factors. We saw treaties being denounced, for example, when the Trump administration decided to withdraw from the Paris climate change agreements. We saw a tendency to do away with established legal practices. Remember 3 years ago when China, which had accepted to go to arbitration with the Philippines about the South China Sea, and decided when the sentence came out that it was not binding on her, and just dropped the whole matter. We saw some organizations which were being deliberately undermined. Think of the World Trade Organization, which had been for the last several years unable to settle any commercial conflict between members, simply because the United States again decided to block the renewal of a number of magistrates. So there were no judges left. So all this compounded by a number of crises which have emerged, but which have several new characteristics. Many of the crises we've been seeing over the last 15 or 20 years had to do not so much with states, but increasingly with the appearance of non-state actors. These non-state actors can be groups with specific agenda. I'm thinking of the terrorist organizations, but also traffickers in weapons, traffickers in drugs, traffickers in human beings. Let us not forget that. So it changes somewhat the perspective against the background also of a change in the nature of many of these crises which are increasingly having to do with failing or failed states. When the state is practically non-existent, of course, it's an open door for especially those non-state actors I was mentioning to step in. We saw in Mali the appearance of Daesh and Al-Qaeda, jihadist terrorist organizations with a very, very specific agenda using asymmetric tactics, hardcore violence, and this because the Malian state failed to do its duties towards its citizens, a vacuum, and they are prompt to use that. And yet failing states, which in many instances try all they can to remain at least with the appearance of power and things that go with it. And this has been aggravated over recent years with the development of communist, populist regimes, which care little about the welfare of their people and do everything they can to further their own agenda without much concern for anything else. As you know, the United Nations Charter stipulated that regional organizations could and should contribute to peace and security. Unfortunately, this has not happened everywhere. Perhaps one of the areas where there has been the most work done has been Africa. The African Union has spent a lot of efforts to develop a concept of African security, but the rub is that they don't have the means to sustain it. In the Middle East, there has never been any serious attempt to develop a regional security architecture. In Asia, simply because there are so many heavy actors, it never materialized. I mean, it's not to say that ASEAN, for instance, hasn't done a good work. It has, but not so much in the area of security. So this is why the UN over a number of years has developed the concept of peacekeeping with its limits, of course, but at least an attempt to contribute to either the settlement of certain outstanding issues or helping the actors, the countries concerned, to build or rebuild themselves and try and play again their role. Successes have existed. You can see them when you look at Western Africa comparing to 15 or 20 years ago, when Liberia, Sierra Leone, Cote d'Ivoire were in a shambles. Certainly, even though there remain many problems today, a lot has been achieved. But at the same time, you still see so many problems in Mali, in the Central African Republic, in the Democratic Republic of the Congo, And it is both a huge effort and a great frustration to see that it doesn't really work. One of the reasons why it doesn't work so well is really has to do with the, I think one can say, the failure lately of the UN Security Council to do its job. The Security Council has been, in so many instances, paralyzed by conflicting agendas. Look at the situation in Syria, where despite many attempts, the UN was practically all along unable to do anything to alleviate this terrible, terrible crisis. You could say the same about Yemen and indeed many other crises. So I think this is an invitation to really, more than ever, think a lot, very hard, about what needs to be reformed. And certainly the reform of the Security Council comes at the forefront from that point of view. The Security Council needs probably to be more representative. It needs maybe more legitimacy. And that is why some countries, including my own, have for many years advocated an enlargement of the Security Council to take on board several countries which have emerged over the last 30 or 40 years as major actors, big potential contributors, and they can therefore contribute. But then, as you know also, unfortunately, that reform of the Security Council didn't lead anywhere so far because of the veto issue, and I will simply mention that certainly changing rules and practice of the veto for the permanent members has to be considered seriously. Also, it needs more leadership from a number of institutions, and as a Frenchman, as a European, I am certainly of the view that the European Union has to continue devoting every effort possible to becoming a real actor, a real contributor. And I'm not talking only of development money, I'm thinking of an entity which can express its views and sustain them certainly more than it has done so far. And let us not forget also that there are so many frozen conflicts there. I'm thinking more of the area of the former Soviet Union. We saw recently the Nagorno-Karabakh coming again to the forefront. And again, in part because of the veto issue, the Security Council was unable to contribute towards building a solution after so many years. So I would say that looking at the world nowadays, certainly it is not satisfactory. I don't want to sound too pessimistic, and I know you will be devoting your work on settlement of crisis and post-conflict situations. Indeed, nothing happens overnight, but I think a lot of work should be devoted to rethinking the way the institutions work when they exist, or creating them when they don't exist yet or have not been able to develop fully. That certainly will be the responsibility of your generation. But unless we do really something about it all, one should be very wary of the prospects. To come back, and I will finish by that, to the present pandemic situation of COVID-19, one has to see that the World Health Organization, who should have been definitely in the lead of international efforts to do something, did not live up to its responsibilities. Of course, certain member states did not exactly work to help that organization assume its responsibilities, but I think it illustrates that the international system has not become stronger, but in fact has become weaker, and sometimes not really able to fulfill its responsibilities. Again, it starts with the UN organization, first and foremost, but then the whole system, I think, will need a lot of thought. So, with those words, I would wish you a good work, and thank you for your attention.
The committee is now in session.
Oh, attends, Lily, les comités ne sont pas encore en session, là.
Oh, sorry, I got really excited. What's next, Charity and Outreach Coordinator?
Pour cette édition, le Medmoun a choisi de supporter 2 associations pour reverser leurs bénéfices.
First, let's look at a charity located in Tunisia.
شبكة اسمها شبكة أمان للطفولة ريزو أمان أنفونس تونيزي تكونت عام 2012. الشبكة هذه تلم 13 جمعية موجودة في تونس تنشط في ميدان رعاية الطفولة الفاقدة للسند. يعني كي نقولوا طفولة فاقدة للسند يعني هما أطفال لا عندهم لا أبو لا أم. العدد نتاعهم مع الأسف كبير برشا. نحسبوهم عام 2019 اللي كانوا أكثر من 1200 فقدوا سندهم في السنة هذيك. اشترهم على الأقل سون ريكوبيري بالجمعيات هذوما اللي هما موجودين على كامل تراب الجمهورية، موجودين من بنزرت حتى المدني. يعني 13 جمعية presque couvre tout le territoire national.
احنا نخدموا ليلة بليلة. نحن معناها أم حاضنة نحن. عندي صغاري نجي صغاري نبدل الكوش ندوش نرضع نلعب نبوس صغاري.
الجمعيات هذوما يحتضنوا اطفال كما قلنا فاقدي السند. الاطفال هذوما اعمارهم تتراوح بين نهار وبين عامين. يعني سي دي بيبي و دي نوفوني. Notre vision est très simple, c'est toujours l'intérêt supérieur de l'enfant. كما تعرف الشبكة هذه تخلقت بعد الثورة. وكان فما حاجة جات باهية بعد الثورة اللي هي رينا الشباب والطاقات اللي عنده كانت مخبية السنين الكل. يعني من الحاجات اللي فرحتنا برشا هو المبادرات الشبابية اللي ولات موجودة بعد الثورة. هذاك علاش اللي اليوم الشبكة elle croit beaucoup en la capacité des jeunes à avoir de l'initiative, à être force de proposition, يجيبوا أفكار et vraiment ça nous fait plaisir. اليوم surtout اللي حاجة تفرحنا برشا كشبكة اللي كونا باش نشاركوا في ميدميون. الحاجة اللي تفرحنا برشا سي كو اليوم دي جون باش يعرفوا شنو هي الشبكة نتاعنا. دي جون من 30 دولة جايين باش يسمعوا بالشبكة وباش يحاولوا يدافعوا على حاجة اون اكتيفيتي ولا على اهداف ولا الفيزيون تاع الشبكة. يعني vraiment c'est quelque chose qui nous fait plaisir, mais c'est aussi je pense que c'est une opportunité pour ces jeunes على خاطر باش يوليو يفهموا واش معناها لا موبيليزاسيون، يفهموا واش معناها défendre une cause، يفهموا واش معناها action ويفهموا واش معناها conséquence d'une action. Je pense que هذه une opportunité لينا احنا زوز كشبكة وليكم انتوما كمدميون. فما حاجة que j'ai envie de dire aux jeunes, c'est que ne pensez pas que votre contribution راهي صغيرة خاطركم entouré de la DCI de Monaco, entouré de Santé Sud. Au contraire, votre contribution عندنا احنا كشبكة في المجتمع المدني qui plaçant l'intérêt de l'enfant قبل كل شيء, votre contribution est aussi importante que ces deux grands bailleurs. Yani, à la limite, elle nous tient plus à cœur.
Next, we present the MAC Association, a Lebanese nonprofit NGO whose purpose is to reintegrate marginalized families and individuals. By giving aid under diverse forms, MAC aims to help families and individuals have self-sufficiency and live with dignity.
MAC apporte son soutien aux Libanais les plus démunis et plus particulièrement ceux des villages les plus isolés du Liban. L'association leur permet d'améliorer leurs conditions de vie en leur garantissant des microcrédits. Ils deviennent des petits entrepreneurs ou même des vrais producteurs. Et ceci les aide à sortir du cercle vicieux de la pauvreté. Et grâce à MAC, ils regagnent confiance en eux progressivement et sont lentement réintégrés au système socio-économique.
MedMen has chosen to help MAC in its ongoing projects, including the Small Business Relief Fund and the Beirut explosion of 2020. If you would like to donate to either of the two charities, please use the MedMen PayPal link written below.
Nous apprécions votre générosité.
Bonsoir chers collègues, je m'appelle Gabriel Kairala, je suis professeur à Sciences Po et à l'Université Saint-Joseph de Beyrouth. Chers délégués, je souhaite vous souhaiter une bonne réunion et vous remercier d'avance pour vos dons pour les deux associations que j'avais choisies. Moi, je peux parler de l'association MAC, dont je suis membre actif. C'est une association qui est dans le microcrédit, qui donne des microcrédits au Liban, bien sûr sans aucun intérêt, pour les jeunes et des moins jeunes qui ont des projets afin de les aider à sortir de la pauvreté, voire de la misère. La situation au Liban est de plus en plus difficile et au lieu de faire de la charité, MAC a décidé de procéder par la solidarité. Donner des microcrédits, c'est permettre à des jeunes et à des moins jeunes d'innover, de créer, d'exercer leur talent et donc de créer de la richesse et pour eux et pour leur société. Alors d'avance, merci beaucoup pour vos aides et pour vos dons. Et très bonne réunion. Au revoir et à bientôt.
Bonjour à tous et bienvenue pour cette nouvelle édition de MedMoon 2021. Je me présente, je m'appelle Rindra Rakoto Malala et je suis de la Croix-Rouge monégasque. Je suis le responsable de l'engagement jeunesse au sein du mouvement et c'est un réel plaisir d'être aujourd'hui avec vous lors de cette édition qui a pu, malgré les conditions sanitaires, avoir lieu même à distance. Ça me fait également très plaisir d'être avec vous et de continuer ce partenariat que nous avons avec MedMoon depuis plusieurs années. Et comme vous le savez, la Croix-Rouge vit principalement de l'engagement des bénévoles. Être bénévole, c'est avant tout faire passer les besoins des autres avant les siens, c'est donner de son temps généreusement et c'est surtout contribuer au changement du monde dans lequel nous sommes plongés aujourd'hui. La Croix-Rouge a été créée en 1864 par M. Henri Dunant qui, lors de la bataille de Solferino, a décidé de mettre en place les premiers secours sans prendre parti pour tel ou tel camp qui était acteur de cette guerre. La Croix-Rouge monégasque, quant à elle, a été créée en 1948 par le prince René III de Monaco et aujourd'hui comporte 600 bénévoles avec comme président le prince Albert II de Monaco. Aujourd'hui, je m'adresse à vous, présents pour MedMoon 2021, car vous avez également votre rôle à jouer au sein de la société dans laquelle nous sommes aujourd'hui. En effet, au travers des compétences que vous avez, au travers des qualités que vous avez, vous pouvez agir à votre niveau dans des petites actions solidaires, internationales, humanitaires, pour pouvoir contribuer au changement du monde de demain. C'est pour cela que j'aimerais laisser la parole aujourd'hui à Chitong, qui est bénévole au sein de la Croix-Rouge monégasque, qui est bénévole avec nous depuis déjà un petit moment, et je laisse la parole du coup à Chitong.
So, hi, I'm Chitong, and I've been working as a volunteer in Monaco Red Cross since summer 2020, so it was midway during the lockdown. And I used to work in Campo Roia in Ventimiglia, Italy. It was a migrants camp for which hosted around 40 something migrants. And I used to organize a lot of activities and did some food and clothes distribution for the migrants. And then after that, I'm now working with unaccompanied minors who migrated across border. And the thing I'm mostly doing is to organize games or just some leisure activities for the minors, for the kids. And I think the experience with Monaco Red Cross was a very enriching one for me, especially because I've always cared about social justice and I care about humanitarian aid for the people in need. And I think the most important lesson that I've learned from my experience with the Monaco Red Cross is to respect people, is to regard people as equal human beings. So we're not just giving them what they need, but we are addressing them as a human. So I think for young people like us, it would be very good to participate in such kind of voluntary work, to feel that we are involved in the actual social issues and to feel that we can do something to improve the situation and to improve our society. Thank you.
And last but not least, we are pleased to introduce our stunning, incredible, and passionate Deputy Secretary General.
Un 2A du campus de Menton, notre DSG travaille beaucoup pour que cette édition se réalise du mieux possible.
For his third and final year at Sciences Po, he will be attending the London School of Economics. But before he goes, he's excited to share the tireless work of his team with you all.
Mesdames et messieurs, Tommaso Campomagnani.
Honorable speakers, chairs, delegates, and faculty advisors. I remember coming here after the first Medmon team meeting, back in September, when the water was still warm enough to go for a quick swim. I would have never imagined that I would be here in this very same spot to give my actual speech for the opening ceremony of Medmon 2021. And while I really cannot complain about the view, there is nothing I would have loved more than to have you all here with me in the Mediterranean, and maybe even see the bravest of you go for a swim after the end of a committee session. You have all been selected from a pool of hundreds of applicants to debate on the most pressing issues concerning the Middle East and the Mediterranean. Many of you are from the region itself and are probably living through the very same events they will be debating about in less than a few minutes. Others hail from Europe, Asia or the Americas and are here to learn or deepen their knowledge of an era that is a crucial flashpoint of contemporary geopolitics. Some are still high school students, eager to experience the thrill of negotiation, while others are studying for their masters at the world's most renowned universities. But whether you're from Spain, Saudi Arabia or Singapore, whether the sun is rising or has set in your time zone, whether you will be debating at the Conseil de Sécurité or a beginner delegate at UNESCO, whether you will be debating in French, English or Turkish, you're all here for the same reasons. You all believe in the power of diplomacy, mediation and compromise as the way to bring about sustainable solutions to deep-rooted problems. Now, Medmon editions are known for getting heated. Do not expect this year to be any different. Expect frustration as your ideal resolution is blocked by a rival delegate during a formal debate. Be ready to be challenged as you face thorny questions, deal with unlikely alliances, countries that go rogue, all under time constraints. But above all, be ready to get excited for 3 days like no other. 3 days of fun, learning and growth. On a souvent tendance à voir les simulations Model UN comme une simple activité extrascolaire. Dans les temps de crise que nous traversons, la pertinence de l'ONU elle-même est remise en question face à l'échec du multilatéralisme vis-à-vis des problèmes dont l'ampleur serait insurmontable. Nos intervenants vous l'auront expliqué mieux que moi, mais le Moyen-Orient figure comme le cas par excellence de cet échec. Pourquoi alors participer à une simulation qui n'est finalement qu'un jeu d'acteur entre étudiants, dans un cadre assez privilégié et qui n'aura presque aucun impact tangible sur les problèmes bien réels dont nous allons débattre? La question se pose. Or, je vous le dis et j'en suis convaincu, vous quitterez cette conférence avec bien plus que de la fatigue d'écran et une ligne additionnelle sur votre CV. Notre simulation ne vise pas à simplement reproduire les problématiques actuelles, mais imaginer des solutions d'avenir. Et qui serait mieux placé pour ce faire que vous, des centaines de jeunes issus des 4 coins de la planète? Ensemble, vous réunissez 40 nationalités avec des parcours variés, des perspectives diverses, mais le même goût pour la diplomatie, le compromis, le même espoir pour un monde meilleur. Chers délégués, l'enjeu est de taille. Et le distanciel ne vous rendra pas la tâche plus facile. Après une année de Zoom, on a tous eu des moments où on a songé à décrocher, où on s'est censuré après avoir été victime de l'énième problème technique. Grâce à notre excellente équipe informatique, je peux vous garantir que vous serez à l'abri de ces derniers. Mais c'est à vous de prendre l'initiative pour éviter les autres périls et faire de cette édition de MedMoon, certes inédite, une expérience inoubliable. Le distanciel, c'est aussi un millier d'opportunités qui sont littéralement au bout de vos doigts. Profitez de cette richesse. Envoyez un message au délégué qui vous a contredit lors d'un formal debate. Renouez le contact avec vos alliances forgées pendant un moderated caucus. Et surtout, venez aux social events que toute l'équipe a soigneusement préparés pour votre divertissement en fin de journée. Bref, prenez ce week-end tout particulier comme une opportunité sans égale pour vous enrichir, pour élargir vos horizons, bâtir des nouveaux liens et faire des nouvelles rencontres qui dureront, si ce n'est pas pour toute la vie, au moins jusqu'à l'année prochaine, où j'espère vous voir tous ici, dans ces mêmes rochers, pour la 10e édition de MedMoon en 2022.
As Secretary General
And Deputy Secretary General,
we are happy to announce
that MedMoon 2021 has officially begun.